Thank you for joining us. You're listening to the Beyond 50 radio program. I'm Daniel Davis. On the program today, we're going to be discussing something that probably not too many people know too much about. Now, on the one hand, they know a lot about the word affirmations, and that is when you think about a goal or something you seek and desire, you sort of state something over and over again in a positive, I already own it sort of a tense, as if it's already happened. And if you do it enough, you begin to believe it, and as they say, there's real magic and power in belief. And pretty soon, that thing makes itself real. Well, how about doing something a little bit different today? This was something that I discovered earlier this year and found some miraculous power behind it. Joining us here on the Beyond 50 radio program today is Noah St. John, and he's created something that I think you're going to find very magical, and that is something known as Affirmations. He's going to discuss with us what this is and why there's so much power behind it. He has a new book coming out by Hay House, and it's called The Book of Affirmations. And as I understand it, you'll get more than $500 worth of bonus training for free when you order this book on his website that we'll mention later on in the program today. Noah, thank you for joining us here on the program.
Well, thank you, Daniel. Great to be here.
Now, how did all this start for you here?
Well, how long do we have? No, I'm just kidding. It really started many years ago, Daniel, when I was became very interested in personal growth and self-help. I grew up poor in a rich neighborhood, which was funny because we were actually in one of the wealthiest neighborhoods in New England, but my family was dirt poor, and I mean that literally. We were at the bottom of a dirt road in an unfinished home.
Wow.
And all around me I saw a lot of wealth and money and things, but my family didn't have any, and I was wondering about that. I said to my mom one night, I said, how come you and Dad are always arguing about money? I mean, I was just a little kid. And she said, well, I'm nervous and scared because there's not enough money coming in. And so, when she said that, it really hit me, and I made two decisions that really affected the rest of my life. One was I really decided that I didn't want that for my life. I didn't want to have that fear and lack and poverty, even though that's all I'd ever known. But I also decided that since I didn't really have anybody to teach me, that I would just go to the library and start reading books on the subject. So I started just reading all the classics of self-help literature for many, many years and really tried to apply it. Well, as you know, and as you mentioned in your opening, one of the things that we've been taught in traditional success literature for many years, decades, is to use these things called affirmations, which are positive statements, a statement of something that you'd like to be true in your life. And so one night in April 1997, I was a religious studies major. I was sitting in my college dorm room, and I was looking around my little tiny dorm room, and I realized that the walls were covered with all of these little statements, these positive statements or affirmations, like I'm happy, I'm healthy, I'm rich, I'm wealthy. But the problem was that I didn't believe any of them. And so my life didn't look like that. I was saying these things for years and years and years, but I didn't believe them, and so they weren't true. And so what happened was I was very frustrated, and I was really just down on myself and doubting myself and very upset. Anyway, I got in the shower the next morning, and I was thinking about all these things. Now, let me ask you, Daniel, have you ever had those things, those aha moments, those epiphanies in the shower? Those shower moments?
Oh, more than that, I believe.
Yes, I mean, it's very common.
Shower's a magical place, isn't it, for creativity?
I call it the shower fairy. I don't know why it happens, but it seems to happen there frequently. But anyway, in this particular morning, it was April 24th, 1997, and I was asking all these questions. They were just sort of bouncing around in my head. And I was saying things like, well, if I've been saying these positive statements for so many years and I still don't believe them, what's it going to take for me to finally believe something good about myself? And there's got to be an easier way, but what is it? And that's when it hit me, and I had that aha moment, and I said, wait a minute. What I'm doing right now is asking questions. And I realized that the human brain, the human mind, is always searching for answers to questions. For example, if I were to ask you, why is the sky blue, what instantly happens in your brain?
Right. It begins to start answering the question.
Right. Exactly. You automatically start to search for the answer. In fact, you can't not do it. You couldn't help it. And so I said, wait a second. If the human mind is automatically searching for answers to questions, why are we going around making statements that we don't believe?
Right.
Why don't we just cut out the middleman?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's how this all started, Daniel. It was it really came from a place of frustration and, not getting what I wanted. And anyway, just long story short, I wrote it all down on my computer. This was back in 1997. Google was like a month old at the time. So it was long before social media and all that stuff that we all have today. But basically, I self-published the book, that long ago, and then the Chicken Soup for the Soul people picked up the book, and now this is my sixth book that's coming out from Hay House, as you mentioned, called the Book of Afformations, where we have just dozens and dozens of amazing stories, case studies, and success stories from people literally around the world who have used my teaching of Affirmations and just had amazing results.
Well, you can imagine, too, how true this journey has been when you talk about having all these affirmations all over the wall. And, as people have these, they just become religious in their mantra about reciting them over and over and over again. But, there are also a lot of cases where people do this, yet they don't really take a lot of action steps toward seeing this goal realized. For instance, one other thing, I've even had people who have created, that big movie that came out some years ago called The Secret. And, in fact, one of them, who was actually a co-producer, says one thing that he didn't like about this particular movie was the fact that it talked too much about money. But what I had pointed out about it is I said, well, there was some power behind what was being suggested, but I think at least my feeling, what I took away from it, and I'm guessing probably a lot of people did as well, is that you can just sit around all day long and intend without action, and somehow the universe is just going to unfold itself in time and just give you what you want. And the fact is, and I'm sure you know this, it's the law of action. Action is part of the word attraction, and so that changes the whole dynamic. But on the other hand, that being said, you also see people who do the affirmations. They're taking the action steps, but like you said earlier, that when we make these affirmation statements, we don't tend to believe them because we're always looking for outside evidence to see whether or not that's true. And that's where you see the real power behind Affirmations, because then the subconscious begins to go to work in solving the problem that you're asking.
Well, that's exactly right, Daniel. And in fact, I called that, and this is one of the things I talk about in the book, called the belief gap. Mm-hmm. And very simply, what I do is I look at it this way. Let's say you are where you are right now, and you want to have some change in your life, which frankly we all do. We want more money, or to lose weight, or get in shape, or find our soulmate, or maybe write a book, or all of these things. But that represents a change from where you are right now. In other words, you are where you are, and you want to be over there. But the point is, you are in what I call your CPR, and that stands for your current perceived reality. That means all reality is perceived reality. So, for example, let's say you have a diehard Boston Red Sox fan and a diehard New York Yankees fan, and they're watching the Red Sox play the Yankees. Are they watching the same game? Well, the answer is yes and no, because one person will be excited when one team gets a hit and the other team strikes out, and, of course, vice versa. So they're watching the same set of circumstances, but it's two totally different ball games, if you see my point. So the point is, we all think that, we have these problems, and they just, they're too big. But meanwhile, somebody else could come along and say, oh, my gosh, it's so easy to solve that. So we all have different belief gaps in our lives. So we are in our CPR, and we want to get to what I call your NDR, which stands for your new desired reality. In other words, I lost the weight, I made the money, I grew my business, or I wrote the book, or I found my soulmate. You see, that's where you want to end up. But between those two things, your CPR and your NDR is what I call your belief gap. In other words, you may have had years and years of training that is really unconscious, but that says, it's really hard to lose weight, or it's so hard to make more money, or the economy's too bad right now, and you can't do that because, you see. And so we have all these belief gaps. So then we come in with a statement that says, for example, I'm skinny or I'm thin or it's easy for me to lose weight, and the person goes, no, it isn't. It's really hard. And so you don't believe it. And when you keep pounding away with those statements, it actually can cause a lot of frustration for people. So that's why, as you mentioned a moment ago, when you use the Affirmations method, that, again, I talk about in the book, the method is the process of asking these empowering questions. And so what happens is it's a bridge over your belief gap. Your brain is wired to answer questions. So when you form different empowering questions, for example, I'll give you an example of one of our clients named Brandon, who was a salesman out in Salt Lake City, and he had spent over $30,000 on different self-help programs, and he was really struggling financially. He wasn't doing very well. And so a friend of his told him about my online programs, at our website and our books and so forth, and so he got our programs and started using the Affirmations method. Long story short, by the end of the year, using the Affirmations and, yes, taking action, as you mentioned, Brandon actually increased his income by 560%. That means quintupled it, which I think that's how you say the word, quintupled. But anyway, he increased it by over 5 times in 1 year, and he actually was named Agent of the Year. And everybody asked him, how did you do it? What's your secret? And he said, I changed the questions that I was asking.
And it's funny because when you think about for the people who are religious, I guess, which could be really all of us, that's exactly what the Bible says, in its own unique ways, is that, the question needs to be asked in a way that you will see the answer. The truth will be revealed, so to speak. Or, at first I was blind and now I can see, I guess, could be another statement as well. But isn't it funny that way when we go after something, whatever it is, and we can't seem to find a solution? All it takes, and you just kind of mentioned this earlier, is just a different point of view, a different perception, so to speak.
It's really true, Daniel, and we all get into these ruts of thinking, and they can occur over years and decades. And these, what I call them assumptions. Now, the word assumptions is another word that I invented, which is a portmanteau of disempowering and assumptions. Okay, so in other words, most people believe they can't do things. I want to make more money. I want to lose weight. I want to find the right person, start my business, grow my business, write my book. But, I probably can't do that. I'm too old, or it's too late, or I've made too many mistakes, or I don't know the right people. See, so guess what? You always find a way to make yourself right. And so the beauty is, now when you just confront them, and that's, I have exercises in the book where I have people just confront these assumptions and say, okay, wait a minute, how long have I been believing this, number one? And number two, do I have to keep believing this? This isn't true. Why do I have to just subject myself to this? And in fact, again, another quick story that I share in the book, which is about a mom named Mary from Wisconsin, and she called me one day and said, no, your work changed my life. And I said, wow, that's great. What happened? She said, I have a daughter who's 13 years old, and she had chronic worry, and she just couldn't sleep. And her name was Stephanie, and Stephanie couldn't sleep, and she was worried all the time. Well, Mary heard me speak at a seminar. I taught her about Affirmations. She went home and taught her 13-year-old daughter how to do this. She learned it in 5 minutes. I mean, it's really simple once you learn it. It's like 5 minutes. And then she started using it, and that very night she stopped worrying, and she never lost another night's sleep after that.
Wow.
So if you have kids or grandkids, they love Affirmations. I've had moms and dads call me from across the country, around the world actually, or contact me and say, I taught my son, daughter, granddaughter, grandson about these Affirmations, and they instantly started getting better grades. They started behaving better. They did better in school, sleeping better, etc. So, I mean, no matter what age you are, these Affirmations really work in your brain.
When you go back into the history, for instance, of self-help, as you talked about in the beginning of the program, you see that self-help back in the early part of the century was a lot different than it is today. And obviously the evidence of that is they talk about affirmations this day and age, and, let's follow the examples of, for instance, Thomas Edison or Albert Einstein. And there's been a time or two that when we have talked about ways of personal empowerment or improvement, that I've brought this up and I said, I think a lot of times, although authors may mean well, they create this folly that creates a never-ending downward spiral for people because they use evidence of whatever the subject is they're talking about in their books, of people who immediately someone says, well, I can't be like that. I'm not an Albert Einstein. I'm not a Thomas Edison. And we actually had a guy on the program, Noah, some time ago, and it was funny because I found this book out in my garage. I didn't even know I had this. And so I started thumbing through and I said, hey, we need to get this guy on our program. And it was talking about the power of the brain, and it was really interesting because he was using examples of success from people you never even heard of before. And you started thinking, wow, I could do this. And it was something about turning your obsessions into a positive thing. And it was really fascinating because as you were reading through this book, you began to think to yourself, I could do a lot of these things, maybe not necessarily what they did here, but whatever I obsess about, I just turn it into a positive thing, and I just obsess and I go through it. Now, of course, we don't really want to put that into maybe relationships because we know how that can turn out. But the fact is, back in the early part of the century, they were talking in a way of how you program into the subconscious mind because that's where the real power is and the creativity, much as like what you're talking about. Kind of talk about why that's important, Noah.
Well, the human brain is like an iceberg, okay? Mm-hmm. And as we know, an iceberg has about 5% that's visible above the surface. But the vast 90 to 95% is hidden below the surface. It's just like that with the human brain. And this is not woo-woo mumbo-jumbo. This is science. I mean, I'm talking Stanford, MIT, Harvard, Yale. They're doing these extensive studies on the brain and the mind and consciousness. And it's just very obvious scientifically that the human being is run mostly by things that are at the subconscious level. Mm-hmm. So we think we're making all these conscious choices every day, but frequently we're not. Right. And so it goes back to what I was saying a moment ago, Daniel, about these disempowering assumptions. I would like to meet my soulmate. I'd like to grow my business. I'd like to lose the weight. I'd like to be happier and healthier. Or, again, just all these. It's not always, or only, I should say, it's not only about money and material things. You're absolutely right that you mentioned a moment ago. I mean, it's all about things that aren't necessarily tangible. The problem is that the default belief of the human race is, I can't do it. I can't have that. That's only for other people. Oh, it's too late. I've made too many mistakes. And we find all of the reasons to make ourselves right that we can't do something. Mm-hmm. And so, again, I'm just challenging people to say, do you have to believe that? And, I'm coming from a place of growing up with lack and poverty and fear and, not knowing if there's going to be food on the table. So I know what that's like, and it's a very lousy feeling. There's nothing good about living in that kind of an environment. Mm-hmm. So, it took kind of a guy like me, just a sort of normal guy, who was trying to just figure out how to live better, how to not be in poverty and fear and lack. And it's been a very long journey. But I've had the opportunity now to work with literally tens of thousands of people around the world and teach them this method. And when you see the amazing, just inspiring stories, like there's another example from the book, a woman named Cecilia who was told she was obese since she was 6 years old. And, she was now in her middle ages, middle age. And she was just told that her whole life, that she was always going to do this. Well, anyway, she found that my book from a friend. Again, it was recommended to her. She went through it. Bottom line, she lost 163 pounds.
My goodness.
Using this method. Yeah, I mean, that's almost the person. But she had tried everything else, and the old yo-yo dieting that we've heard so much about. Mm-hmm. And that's the point. What causes yo-yo dieting? Well, what causes yo-yo dieting is you got to look beyond that and say, well, look, does everybody on planet Earth know how to lose weight? Well, of course we do. You do two things. You eat right and exercise. That's it. There is no secret. And yet, why then are there 10 billion books about how to lose weight? Because it's not a how-to. It's not a how-to problem at all. It's a belief that you can't do it.
Right.
And so, you can buy my book and save yourself lots of time, because it's like, my God, wait a minute, if I just confront this belief that says, well, I can't lose weight, why is that true? Oh, and then you find all the reasons. Well, why don't we get rid of those, and you know what you have to do. You just eat right and exercise, and everybody knows how to do that. And then, then it comes the excuses. Well, I can't because. Okay, well, now you're making yourself right for something you don't want.
Mm-hmm.
Why are you doing that? You see, and people just don't think that. Like, wait a minute, it can actually be so much simpler than you're doing.
I like the example you use, Noah, of the woman losing weight. There was a friend of mine that I knew some years back, and she was that way when I knew her. She was overweight, but for her, it kind of worked at the time. It wasn't like, overly ridiculous, but anyway, it was about 4 years down the road. She was in a place, and I came in, and she says, "Hi, Daniel, how are you doing?" And I thought it was somebody else. She really looked like somebody else that I knew. And I said, "Oh, I'm doing pretty good. How are you?" And I actually called her by the person who I thought she was. And she says, "Well, I don't know about, that person there, but, anyway, how are things going?" And so I was like, "Oh, well, now what do I do?" So you know how sometimes you'll run into someone who knows you, and you'll stand there and you'll talk to them until you figure out who the heck it is in the first place.
Right.
And so as I'm doing that, then it finally hit me who she was, and I was just astounded. And so we ended up having a nice hour-long conversation. I said, "So, what happened with you?" And she says, "Well, I was just going about life, at the time that you knew me, and I wasn't really happy about what was going on. And there was a passion that I always had. For instance, she wanted to actually work in law. And her husband had said, look, why don't you quit what you're doing? You're not happy with what you're doing. I'm bringing in some pretty good money with retirement. Go after what it is that you've always wanted to do." And she says, "Well, okay." And she says, literally, the weight just dropped off of her. And at that moment, as she was talking about it, I understood completely what she was talking about. And you can see how affirmations can help lead a person in that direction. As you said, it's sort of peeling away those onion layers you keep hearing about to reveal the truth. That's pretty much how it works, isn't it?
Oh, very much so, Daniel. I mean, it really is. It's an uncovering process of, frankly, what I say to my coaching clients and my mastermind students, I say it's about the lies you're telling yourself that you believe.
Mm-hmm.
Will Rogers, who I'm sure we all know, the great humorist, he had a great line, which was really very true. He said, "It ain't what a man don't know that gets him in trouble. It's what he knows that ain't so." And I always remember that because, for tens of thousands of years, we humans thought the earth was flat. Well, of course it's flat, dummy. Walk outside, it's flat. What's the problem? And then some guy comes along and says, "Guess what, guys? It's round." What? You're crazy. And then of course we think the earth is the center of the universe and the sun goes around the earth. Of course it does, dummy. Look around. Come on. What, are you stupid? And then, of course, Galileo comes along with a telescope. Guys, it's, no, Earth's going around the sun. No, throw him in jail. You see my point? So, there's that whole thing of the beliefs that, I'm sure you've heard that phrase, they go through the process of first it's ridiculed, and then it's, accepted, and then it's just, now it's common knowledge. Mm-hmm. But that's what I think that with Affirmations is starting to happen, because this is a very new, it's really a new technology of the mind. And that's why I had to give it a new name, because the word Affirmations that we're used to, the one we've been taught for decades, comes from the Latin word firmare, which means to make firm. Now, the word Affirmations that I invented, and by the way, it's perfectly legitimate to invent a new word when you have a new technology or a new way of looking at the universe, like Google or software or internet. These are new terms because there's a new technology and we needed a new word to describe it. Well, the word Affirmations comes from the Latin word formare, which means to make which means to form or give shape to. So what I often ask my coaching clients and mastermind students, I say, what if you're making something firm, but it's in the wrong form? That's called a life you don't want. Like you're forming things using, because of these assumptions, well, I can't do this, I can't do that, it's too late for me, I've made too many mistakes. Well, that's why you formed it. You're asking disempowering questions, you're using or holding on to these disempowering assumptions, and then, of course, you have to make it true. So what I encourage people to do is say, well, let's just challenge all those assumptions, just like the earth is flat or, the sun goes around the earth. We believed it for thousands of years, but that doesn't make it true.
No, you bring up a great example of something about finding evidence-based reality, and that is the idea that for centuries mankind believed that the earth was flat. Now, here's something really interesting, and this may be for you as well as our listeners. Do you know that particular reality was created in the 1860s? That the earth was flat? And from that point forward, we bought into it as a society and recycled this truth on and on and on to the point where it's become a cliche. Well, we used to believe the earth was flat. Now, here's the interesting reality to that statement. It was back in the 1860s that Cornell University was created by the founder. And he actually put together a book of history, which was terrible, by the way, because there was so many omitted or wrong facts about history, yet it was taught in this person's university. One of those things happened to be the idea that we believed at one time that the earth was flat. And, of course, along into our public schools, the kids were taught that Christopher Columbus was set out to discover that the earth was not indeed flat but really round. The fact is, thousands of years ago, the Greeks had mapped out planet Earth and its circumference and can tell you what the circumference was to an exactitude of within 1 mile. Thousands of years ago, we knew this. And through the centuries, we knew the Earth was round. But in the 1860s, again, the founder of Cornell University slipped in the idea that we believed at one time the Earth was flat, and people have been recycling that ever since. And the fact that I'm getting at is there are a lot of times we build beliefs around things that we have no real evidence or have never actually explored before and throw our lives on autopilot to prove that they're right and we go about our day. And because you're doing, it sounds like, fairly well, people are recycling about how bad the economy is. But I don't know about you, but around me, a lot of my neighbors look like they're doing okay in this troubled time.
Exactly, and I'm sure you've heard, Daniel, and our listeners have heard too, that how many companies and great fortunes were made during the Great Depression.
Right.
And so we hear that a lot now in these circles. But of course, you're going to hear just as many people, if not probably more, saying how bad it is and ain't it awful and woe is us, and everything's getting worse and worse. A good friend of mine named Peter Diamandis recently wrote a book called Abundance, and he, had gone through exhaustive lengths to prove that everything is actually getting better. Mm-hmm. I mean, and it's hard to believe, I know, but, he wrote a book on that, and so it's very fascinating to look at, and quite frankly, what it boils down to is who you choose to hang out with. And I always talk with my coaching clients about that, Daniel, and I'm sure you do that as well with your friends and colleagues, which is it's so important to, number one, look at who your friends are, and number two, realize that that's pretty much going to be who you become. You're pretty much going to become the 5 or 10 people that you associate with the most. Mm-hmm. So if you want to raise your vibration, if you want to, for example, lose weight, and studies have actually shown this, that if you want to lose weight, you literally need to hang around healthier people. And that if your social circle is people who are overweight or tend to be overweight, that will just tend to continue because, and again, to be very blunt, when you start to eat healthier, for example, they may make fun of you. They may say, well, what are you trying to do here? Are you trying to make me look bad? And it has nothing to do with them, but they make it about themselves.
Right.
So you want to do that. And again, with money or with books, let's say, 80% of adults in America want to publish a book someday or write a book. And so if you want to write a book, if that's your dream, if that's your goal, then you need to hang around authors and people who've written books, not people who say, oh, you can't do that, oh, that's too hard, or what makes you think anybody would listen to you. There's plenty of people who are going to say that to you. Well, don't hang around them. So just little things like that sound so simple, and frankly, they are simple. They're not always easy, and that's one of the things I do talk about in the book, the difference between simple and easy. Just because something is simple doesn't mean it's easy. Like we all know that to lose weight, you eat right and exercise. That is it. There is no secret. That is the secret. Okay, and that's simple. But I will grant you that's not always easy. With our busy lives, and it's easy to just do fast food, et cetera, et cetera. So, okay, we can always find excuses of things and to keep the status quo. But if you're going to do something worthwhile, it's not always going to be easy, but we try to keep it simple.
Of course. I like two examples you use, especially about losing weight, and Rodney Dangerfield in the movie Back to School, as he has this commercial. If you want to look thin, you hang around fat people. And then the other one you were talking about, becoming an author, someone who writes a book. I encourage people to read Stephen King's book on writing. And I guarantee you, folks, when you read that, you'll believe that you can write. And he suggests that you don't go and take writing courses. He says because they're too busy trying to tear apart what it is you're doing, and in the interim what happens is they begin tearing away your creative process. Believe it or not, what he does is he writes books that he knows his wife is going to like. And then he'll also submit that same story to 8 other people that he knows will give him an unabashed criticism, but it isn't so much the criticism, it's they give him feedback on points of view of how they're interpreting, the story itself, to see if, in fact, he's getting across what the ideas are within his story. And I thought, that's a fantastic way to empower people to believe that you can write a book, But he says what you have to do, just as you said, Noah, if you're going to be a writer, you need to sit down and you need to be sure that you start writing. And he says at least write 1,000 words minimum a day so you get into the habit. So the Afformations is a great starting point in asking the right questions, but you still have to develop the habits. Is that true?
Oh, without a doubt. And by the way, I just want to make sure we mention, Daniel, and you mentioned this at the opening, on our website, on afformationsbook.com, when people do order the book, we have a lot of free bonuses to help people with all the things that we're talking about. So in other words, when you order the book at our website, you get all these exclusive interviews with many best-selling authors, including my good friends Nick Ortner, who wrote a book called The Tapping Solution, Dr. Fabrizio Mancini, who wrote a book called The Power of Self-Healing. We also have different audio programs for you that actually give you these affirmations set to inspiring music, so you can listen to them while you're reading or as you're just going throughout your day. In fact, what I have often worked with my clients on and say to them is, you can actually use these affirmations to change your brain while you're doing other things. So you can actually manifest what you want and attract your desires while you're not even paying attention. Because, like I said earlier, the human brain is about 5% conscious, about 95% subconscious. That means while I'm talking to you right now, Daniel, I can actually listen to my Affirm or Affirmations audios. So they're penetrating my subconscious thought patterns. I'm not even paying attention. And so what's amazing is most people are feeding themselves really, really bad thought seeds, bad thought food, if you want. And so that's what I'm saying is that what these free gifts are when you order the book is about helping you to retrain your brain. And the beauty is you can do it while you're not even paying attention. I actually use these while I'm, writing emails or watching TV. People do them while they're on the treadmill or in the car, in the office. You can even do them in your sleep. And I have actually had this amazing stories. One woman sent me an email recently named Claudette, and she had fibromyalgia and just was in pain all the time. And she started listening to these audios, and her pain dropped down to below 5% of what it was before. We've had people who've actually had skin problems and skin diseases that they couldn't even figure out, and they started listening to and using these affirmations, and the skin problems went away. Again, I'm not trying to make this sound like magic or hype it up. I'm trying to be very scientific and actually just really tell you, again, real-life stories that people share with me unsolicited that I get every single day. Again, I just wanted to let folks know when you go to Afformationsbook.com, by the way, that's spelled AFFORMATIONS, Affirmationsbook.com. That's where you can get all these bonuses, actually over $500 worth of bonuses for free.
It must be very exciting, Noah, as to know that not only how your life has changed to materialize in a way that you dreamed, but also to see other people achieve their dreams as well. Again, as you said, it's not all about money, but, if that's certainly a goal of yours, then, there's nothing wrong with that whatsoever. And the last part of the program here, give us an idea how you do an affirmation. I know we've talked about what it is, but how do we do one? Give us an idea.
Sure, absolutely. And so what I do is I give you actually the 4-step method in the book, and I'll share that with you right now. But again, basically remember that it is simple. And that's what I really want people to realize is that we want to keep it simple because, quite frankly, we're all busy. We've got a million things to do every day, and we don't need one more thing to make our life more complicated. So really, and I guess maybe I'm just a simple-minded kind of a guy, and so I like things that are simple, that you can just do. So the first thing you do is you ask. And what that means is you ask yourself what you want. So what are your goals? Again, do you want to lose weight? Do you want to attract your soulmate? Do you want to publish a book? Do you want to start a business, grow your business, leave your job, get a better job, whatever it is? You need to ask yourself what it is that you want. And the second step is to affirm. Now, what that means is you affirm, and you say, well, why is what I want true right now? Why is this? Why am I able to lose weight? Why can't I have what I want to have? Why can't I attract my soulmate? Why can't I grow my business? Now, the reason you're asking it that way is because right now you believe you can't. Again, I'm just saying the default belief of the human race, which is I can't. And so you're always going to find a reason why you can't. So you've asked that question of yourself unknowingly probably 10 billion trillion times in your lifetime without knowing it. So I'm saying, why don't we just do the opposite? Let's just try it. I know it sounds crazy. I know it sounds silly, but just try it and see what happens. So that's the second step. The third step is called accept. And that's where you accept the truth of it. Now, what I mean by that is you need to, for example, use these audios that I was just sharing with you. We call them I Affirm audios. So what they do is they get in your subconscious brain. You just listen to them. Again, you can be doing other things. You're not just sitting there staring at your navel, because I know we're busy people and we have lots of things to do every day. And so you can literally be watching television and listening to these I Affirms too. That's just one way to do it. But you can write about it. You can read them. There's many ways to do it. So you just accept it, and you give yourself to the question, and you start to think about, well, what if this were true? How would my life be different? And then the fourth step is to act. As you shared earlier, Daniel, unfortunately, the way the world doesn't work is you sit there and think about money, and money pours in from the sky. Gosh darn it, wouldn't that be easier if it were like that? Why doesn't it work that way? But see, the reason it doesn't work that way is because that would be breaking the law. See, now I'm not talking about human law. I'm talking about universal law. Universal law is that you can't get something for nothing. That doesn't exist. So, like I said earlier, this isn't magic. You can't sit there and say, well, why is it so easy for me to lose weight? And then you never do anything different. You still eat bad junk food. You never exercise. Well, of course you're not going to lose weight. So this isn't magic. It's science. Your brain's already doing this. I'm just showing you how to do it for yourself, or in an empowering way rather than a disempowering way, like you're probably doing right now. Most people are. So you got to take action. So, what are 3 things that you could do right now that you could literally start to, let's say lose weight. Maybe one thing would be, I'm going to stop drinking so much diet soda, and I'm going to drink water instead. I'm gonna cut out eating all those cookies. Maybe I'll just have one cookie instead of 5.
Mm.
You know, again, is that hard? No. I mean, it might be hard a little bit at the beginning, but I also suggesting you get support, you get help from your friends, or go online. And one of the things that we have, is our online forum on Facebook, etc. We've got tons of support. We literally have thousands of formers. That's what we call ourselves. People who use Affirmations, we call ourselves Affirmers. And there's, thousands, tens of thousands of Affirmers all around the world. And there's plenty of support out there. You just have to reach out and get it. So really, those are the 4 steps, Daniel. And it really is very simple. And that's what I was sharing earlier. We've had little kids, 7, 8, 10, 13-year-olds, as well as people, of all ages who've used these affirmations to make more money or lose weight or find their soulmate. And, it really is so wonderful to see these great success stories. And I feel like a proud dad, when I read these stories. I say, wow, it's just so wonderful to see them and read them and hear about how people are using these affirmations.
It was actually a really neat question. I remember when I went to one of our guests' seminars, she says, come on in and check this seminar out. I think you'll enjoy it. And I like the question she posed to the audience because it really got you thinking in a really interesting way, and that is simply this. If life got easier for you starting today, would that be okay with you? And I thought, well, yeah, but that's the power of how the mind works. You don't say life is easier. Oh, yeah, well, show me where it is because we're struggling, I can't pay. And then there goes the long litany of reasons that it isn't. But you ask something, you just change the question, and all of a sudden the mind's like, well, yeah, sure, why not? Well, let's see how we can figure this out. And it's just really amazing how it all changes. So you see, Noah, again, when I came across this, I can't even remember where, and I said to the producer, we should get this guy on the program because this makes a lot of sense. And not only that, the producer was so excited that she actually shared it with another person who teaches empowerment, and she actually mentioned that on the show. She says, the producer shared this, and I really love that. I was like, oh, my goodness. So there goes the ripple effect. I said, yeah, I'm still trying to see what else is in the book here, but, apparently a new one's coming out this summer, or is it already out?
It's coming out this summer, but you can pre-order the book now at affirmationsbook.com, and when you buy one book or pre-order one book online, you get these 5 bonuses I was talking about, and then when you pre-order 2 or more, you actually get a second level of bonuses that are really awesome, like these exclusive interviews that I've done. In fact, with the president of Hay House, my publisher, Reed Tracy, who's one of the most respected people in all of publishing, and I have an exclusive interview with him, as well as other interviews with just literally very, very, very successful people from all different industries. So again, that's why we want to share that with folks at affirmationsbook.com, because you can pre-order it and then we'll ship it to you, but you can get those bonuses right away.
Yeah, it's amazing, Noah, just to kind of leave our listeners with an idea. I came across a DVD a couple of months back about Steve Jobs, and there was one of the most amazing sequences from a very rare interview that they had with him. And this was back as Apple was beginning to slowly take off. It was Steve Jobs with the sideburns. He looked like a nerd. He didn't look like the Steve Jobs we came to know afterwards. And he simply says, that when we go about life, we tend to live by rules that were created by people. And really the gist of what he was saying was this, that these people aren't any smarter than you are. And when you begin to realize this, it changes your life profoundly. And I remember some years back, we attended, it was a fundraiser where you played a game of Monopoly, and you'd sit at tables of 4 to play Monopoly. And I'm sure all of us have played Monopoly, and I'm sure there are quite a few of us who have mastered it where we're almost unbeatable. But at this fundraiser, you had real estate developers, investment bankers, and the whole like. And here I was, just a radio show host, so to speak. And I was just starting business, again, this was several years back for myself. And as I sat in this room playing Monopoly against these people and was doing some whooping, I realized, these people aren't any smarter than I am. The only difference between them and me as far as success goes is they just chose to do it. And it sounds to me, Noah, that's exactly what you're saying in your book, and you certainly use Afformations to begin asking right questions. That's very empowering.
It really is, and I love that word empowering, Daniel, because when you look at that word, that is really what most of us are doing to ourselves, is disempowering ourselves. That means we are taking away our own power to act. Mm-hmm. We all have the power to act inside of us, but it is our thoughts, our beliefs, our assumptions that stop us. Again, the default belief of the human race is, I can't. Well, right. If you believe you can't, then what actions are you going to take? Probably none. So what are your results going to be? Pretty much none. So there you go. You proved yourself right. So I'm just encouraging everyone to, why don't you prove yourself right that you can?
Right.
Well, what if I fail? You will fail. We all fail. The point is, and I mean, Steve Jobs being a perfect example, he was fired from Apple.
Right.
And he talked about that in that famous speech from Stanford. Mm-hmm. How do you think that felt, to be fired from the company you started? That was a little embarrassing.
Right.
So the point is, we have this terrible, most of us have this terrible fear of failure. And what I say is, no, it's the other way around. You should fail faster. Just get failure over with. It's going to happen, but it doesn't have to be the end. It's just a learning experience. And then you keep going and keep going and keep going. Just one of the stories that I share in the book is about my good friend Jack Canfield from Chicken Soup for the Soul. Do you know how many times Chicken Soup for the Soul was rejected by publishers before it was ever published?
I believe it was more than 300 times, wasn't it?
Well, it was 144.
Oh, okay.
144, and that came from Jack himself, who confirmed that number. So my point is, you could sit there and say, well, he failed 144 times. Okay, well, they sold 108 million books, so you tell me if he failed or not. The only failure is to stop trying.
Right.
So, again, stop being so afraid and tell yourself that failure is this terrible, awful thing. Of course, it's not any fun, and we don't want to, do it all the time. But, my gosh, the stories go on and on and on. We've all heard them of Abraham Lincoln and Colonel Sanders, and you guys, you know all the stories. But my point is, it's the thought behind it. Why did these people keep going when everyone else would have quit? The answer is because they thought they could. They believed that they could. And so that's what I'm just encouraging. Now with Affirmations, quite frankly, we can all start to think like that. It doesn't happen by magic, but it's actually very, very simple. And now, again, coming from a guy like me who came from poverty and lack and fear, if I can do it, anybody can do it.
So much fun. Noah, for our listeners, go ahead and give out that website again.
Sure. It's Afformationsbook.com, which is spelled AFFORMATIONS, like Afformations with two Fs, and then book.com. So Afformationsbook.com, and when you get one or two or more copies of my new book of Affirmations from Hay House, I'll give you over $500 in really, really awesome bonuses, including interviews and audios and things that will really, really help your life. And, again, I just encourage you to, when you write to me, feel free to tell me that you heard me on Daniel's show here today, and look forward to connecting with you.
And just remember also, listeners, too, if you begin to change and your friends don't want you to change, well, change your friends. Noah, thank you so much for being here on the Beyond 50 radio program.
My pleasure, Daniel. Anytime.
We want to encourage you listeners also to visit us at our website. We'll have a hot link there for you as well for this Affirmations book. Simply go to beyond50radio.com. That is the number 50. We also do have a free weekly e-news update for you to sign up and enjoy as well. We thank you again for joining us here on the program today. I'm Daniel Davis, and remember, live your day past